you couldn't really buy construction in the late 90s until, you know, from 98 and 99 it was tough. The market was pretty well gone as far as major construction were going, because the underwriters, you know, Rob was alluding to a lot of the risks that happened in Norway. Well, the joke in the market, I can joke because I'm not an underwriter, so it didn't cost me anything. But basically from probably around 1990 to 98, it felt to me like the insurance market was basically funding the research and development for the entire Norwegian North Sea sector. I mean, that's what it seemed like to me. Okay, so we got third-party liability cover placed away from the CAR following the depackaging initiative. You can still get away with it on construction a little bit, and I'll talk about third-party liability on the next slide in more detail. Okay, so third-party liability, as a result of an initiative by the Lloyd's Performance Managing Directorate, which they made, and Tom Bolt in particular, who's the grand fromage of that directive. Following the Macondo Deepwater Horizon loss, he came up with a number of initiatives saying, like, thou shalt not put TPL on operating and construction risks as part of a package because you guys don't know how to rate it, you don't know what you're doing with it. I mean, all of that may well have been true, but I mean, the fact of the matter is that you know, his initiative to move it away into the traditional third-party liability market and to be underwritten that way with those specialist guys is actually, it has worked. I mean, it has moved across to that. So you're seeing that the third-party liability is placed outside the operational and construction packages into the specialist TPL market. I mean, there's exceptions, but in general terms, that's the way it's moved. Okay, you need to have detailed underwriting submissions that are required for large programs. Third-party liability, you sometimes just sort of rocked in there and said, well, there's no third party, here we go. And I still say that a lot when I'm not talking about the ABC, which is basic, or AAC, I guess, Australia, Canada, and USA. Or I guess I better say America to make my AA thing make sense. But those three markets are slightly different. Everywhere else is really not too much of a problem as far as liability is concerned. And Paul's going to throw something at me in a second here probably, but anyway. Okay, so another one of the big bugbears that have been in the market for a while now is really to do with project damage to existing property. We're seeing it more and more now going as something for the TPL underwriters to address. It quite often was in construction programs as well, and the kind of history behind it was really along the fact that it was designed to assist in protecting loss records under the operator's existing operating policies and to secure cover for minimal premium. There's a lot of big oil did that, because a lot of big oil have got maybe $10 million deductibles. So if they can actually get damage to existing property included as being effectively first party within the construction policy, well, then it's going to protect their operating risks, because if you actually have a loss there and it's on that particular program, then you can actually get, for a minimal premium and a lot lower deductible, a recovery on that basis. So it really did protect their operating program, which is the reason that they quite liked it. The market is now looking for a clear declaration in respect of such owned surrounding property. So now they're saying, okay, yeah, okay, if you want to do it, but you've got to schedule it. And they're going to start, they're making it a lot more expensive to do. And so we're seeing a significant rise in the premium levels there. We still get away with it. We have a lot of our facilities, we can do it still in first party so that you can get a recovery on that basis. But again, that's only because the underwriters that we have a relationship with will agree to that. It's not a common market practice. The common market practice is that you're going to have to get it rated separately. So specialist TPL underwriters, TPL market with established leaders are now the vogue. Market capacity for standalone third-party liability in this space is around $1.5 billion. There's been a slight pressure on the premium rates, but there's been no real sign of widespread reduction. So the TPL market is holding a lot more firmer than the operational and property and construction markets, which are slippery, sliding down that slope. I mean, it'll come to pass for them too pretty soon. It depends really on how long the cycle is of being soft. So there was, and there was a market wording that the liability guys came up with, which took them a while to do because you can never get 2 or 3 liability guys to agree on anything, in my opinion. But they, so there's been a new wording that came out in 2013, and it's widely used now, so it's quite a recognized wording in the market. I won't go into great detail about that. Paul sort of touched on the various liability forms that are out there. This is just a kind of new one, which has only recently sort of been formalized. So another another event that's happened as a result of Macondo was the introduction in the energy market of anti-stacking clauses. Now, I don't know if you're all familiar with anti-stacking clauses as such. Really what they are, that prevents more than one limit or more than one deductible to apply to a single loss event. The problem, and Paul was alluding to it in a slightly different format, but in the same bit, he was talking about the co-insurers. In this case, what you had is you had a lot of underwriters across the board on a number of different programs. You had Transocean claims, you had Halliburton claims, you had, I mean, there was just a lot of different liability type issues that were going on. And so a number of underwriters really found themselves like, oh gosh, we're 100 million here, 100 million here, 100 million. So they basically introduced this anti-stacking to restrict that outlay that could happen. Okay, so this slide here just, again, shows the downstream underwriting capacities that are there. It's interesting to note that, you know, it's only been in recent times that there's been more upstream capacity than downstream. Historically, there's always been much more downstream capacity, but that's changed slightly. So what we have here is it's basically it's the highest downstream market capacity since, well, I guess over the last 15 years. Here we've got, this is the estimated realistic capacity here. International is the dark, North America is the lighter gray. And you can see here that, you know, they're over, you know, 5 billion as such, with the realistic one coming in a little over 4.5 billion. So this increased capacity is going to continue to put downwards pressure on the downstream market premium levels. Can you give me if you're going to come over and grab my tie and start pulling me off, just give me a heads up, okay? I like my neck and I like my tie. Okay, so continuing on, downstream energy losses from 2000 to 2015. Again, you can see here that there's been a slight improving trend over the past few years, but it has increased. It hasn't, you know, it coincided with increased capacity. So there'll be pressure to deter an increase in rates. You can see here again, we've got this deterioration thing going on here on this year, and you can see that the non-marine market, okay, there's a profit. You know, there's, you know, in the last 15 years they've had 2 years of definite profits with a couple of years of just sort of getting by. So, you know, it makes you wonder sometimes. Okay, so what's happening with the downstream energy market as far as major losses excess of 50 million are concerned? So up to roughly September 21st this year, you'll see here, this is one of the reasons why the energy market doesn't have a major love affair with BI. I mean, they kind of need it for premium as such, but if you look at the losses, okay, so you got a PD loss at 173 million, a BI loss of 847. 75, 603, 65, 110. Well, by their standards, that's almost good. 40, 120. I mean, it's kind of borderline dysfunctional. You have these sort of fairly minor sort of PD losses, and then the BD element of it just kicks in and it just disjoints the whole thing. So, I mean, talking to the non-marine energy guys, I mean, they're always bemoaning the BI premium levels and that, but they don't seem to do anything about it that often. So, you know, maybe one day they will, maybe one day they won't, I don't know. So as far as this shows, it's only one loss in excess of US dollars 50 million in 2015 in contrast to 2014. However, there have been, you know, 2 other large losses excess of 50 million since this slide was put together. One of them is an incident in the Czech Republic, and the other one is a loss in the USA. So We've also got that, and I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly probably, but the Tijan port loss in China. That loss is actually getting kind of big. It's between 2 and 3 billion insured. So there's a lot of the big Swiss companies and German companies, and maybe the French to a certain extent, that are actually doing a lot of treaties for the Chinese market. They're starting to have second thoughts about this a little bit because, I mean, they all have big treaties, and it's an insurable loss, so it's going to hit them hard. But generally speaking, talking to a lot of the market, they seem to think that 2015 is likely to yield, you know, a profit, which, hurrah, it's the third time in 15 years, so good for them. But BI losses are just totally disproportionate. Okay, so this slide here, I mean, all this slide really is it shows the capacities versus the average. So it's a sister slide to the one that we did for the upstream, yeah? And if you look in here, you can see, again, this is your composite rate in 1992, which was, you know, your baseline's 100. And you go across into here and you can see where, okay, here they're happily going down, 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 down. Oh, what's happened? There's your capacity. Higher the capacity goes, the lower the rates go, the lower the premium. So it just keeps tracking like this. And at the moment, it's pretty sad. So, you know, really all this slide shows you the effects really, there's no escape from supply and demand. You know, you got a lot of supply and you're gonna, it's, you know, in the absence of any other intervening factor, increased capacity invariably leads to lower rates. And that's what we're seeing right now. Okay, so downstream operating, what are the current trends? Well, as we said, the realistic capacities, a little over $5 billion, we reckon. Losses, well, they continue to be bad. There's slightest signs of possible upturn exist in 2014, but, you know, higher utilization will invariably lead to deterioration of the record, so as we've seen on previous 2 years. Deductibles are largely unchanged, and the conditions are largely unchanged. While the rates, there's ongoing weakness in the ratings, so we're seeing it getting quite soft. It's a bit surprising because, you know, the losses have been pretty unsatisfactory, but at the moment it's just so much competition for the premium. A lot of the underwriters I spoke to think, well, my new treaty, doesn't matter. That's what it's there for, you know, kind of thing. And if they're going into the property treaty market, then there's no history as such. So they're just playing it on a sort of year-by-year basis, it seems. So it's all fueled by the softening trend. Downstream is increasingly being looked to as a property line, as I mentioned. And there's a willingness to complete the secure market share off the back of cheap reinsurance. So some guys are just riding the storm, some are just taking advantage of the circumstances. So what's the long-term outlook? You know, how can this position be maintained? The trend for onshore energy becoming a property line makes it more likely that this can carry on for a little bit longer. Right. No, you're not throwing an evil eye at me yet. Okay, we're good. Okay, so what's the conclusion? Well, the major brokers' reliance on pay-to-play facilities. The pay-to-play facilities are Marsh, Aon, Willis, all the big brokers have got these facilities, which they're basically, can I say ramming down people's throats? Can I? I did. What these facilities, I mean, you may have heard about them. Berkshire Hathaway was one of the early entries into this, where they basically had a percentage share of the entire book of business that Marsh underwrote. Now, I'm not just talking energy, I'm talking everything. And they pulled out last year. They thought, this is not quite working. But there's been a significant number. Aon have just recently done one, where there's been at least six or seven, fairly large underwriters, Catlin, QBE. There's been a number of underwriters that have agreed to do a cross-section of Aon's book. And what's interesting about it, I never realized this, but you know, what Aon brings into the London market, maybe 1.5 billion, what Aon do worldwide is about 50-odd billion dollars. That's a lot of money. And so what they're actually, and I don't know if it's true, but that's what they're saying. But the fact of the matter is, if you're an underwriter, you're sitting there saying, well, I don't know, market doesn't look too good. If I can get, you know, 20% or 30% or something out of this. So they're saying that's what the pay-to-play facilities are. The Marsh facility, I mean, AIG guys told me you had to pay $1 million just to sign on to it, to then write a proportion of their book. And no one that I know has really made much money out of it. But people are still going, going into signing up to the fray. It's kind of dumbing down a bit. I mean, how are the underwriters going to learn how to underwrite if all they have to do is basically, sign over what they're not doing any underwriting. They're basically just getting a check in the post or an invoice for a bill. And actually it doesn't really do the broker any good either, because you're not broking anything, not specifically. So, it's a bit of a worrying trend. There's a lot of underwriters that aren't going along with it, but there are some that are, and it seems to be, I don't know, the London market's moving into this kind of e-commerce type scenario where they want to do everything on a single piece of paper electronically. And I'm a bit of a cynic about it, and if my managing director was here, he'd be throwing things at me. But the fact is, I got involved with it in Heath in the early 90s, and it didn't work. And I got involved with it at HSBC in the 2000s, and it didn't work. And I'm at Price Forbes right now in the 2010s, and will it work? I don't know. I mean, it's too complicated. You have too many sections. You need to, if you let an underwriter just make a decision based on an email with a piece of paper in there, then the outcomes may not be to our satisfaction, in my opinion. I'm also trying to keep my job. So anyway, so what does this all do? You have a commoditization of the offers to the customers, better fit in various electronic placing as I outlined. Client advocate, insurance broking, it caters to the customer's risks, and which provides administrative and claim support we all view as necessary. This is becoming rare, but that's what we do. I mean, this is, you want somebody to present something to you in a format that actually is professional and explains everything you need. So, I think it's bad news across the board. How will the junior underwriters learn to underwrite? I really don't know. I'm just kind of glad. I was telling my wife the other day, I'm glad I'm not 28 anymore. Oh, and I wish I was 28, but I'm glad I'm not 28 in this industry, because it'd be a long slog, I think, probably. Okay, so I think that the soft market will end. They've always ended in the past with withdrawals, bankruptcies, job losses, and it's going to happen again. We just don't really know how long. I mentioned earlier about Berkshire Hathaway having pulled it out of the brokers' facilities. Maybe this is the first step. I mean, Warren Buffett doesn't get things wrong very often. So why people are running into doing this at, paying high commissions and signing away their pen, I really don't understand, but, whatever. They're the guys that are driving around in Ferraris, and I'm driving around in a 2000, 180,000 Volkswagen Golf, so what do I know? Right, okay, so the last slide here, guys. In the interim, the premium income to the insurance market will fall. You can see here that it's not really moving in a direction that is all that satisfactory on here. But the market will stabilize at some time. The cycle will continue. Our strategy focuses on taking advantage of the softening market whilst retaining tried and tested structures, and always the key relationships with underwriters, and that our clients will need when the hard market comes back, because they'll need it when the hard market comes back. Oh, lost a slide on there. Sorry, guys. I apologize if I went quite quick, but Ken scares the living daylights out of me. I just thought he's going to... Is there any questions at all? No? I know doom and gloom is a bad thing to try to sort of advertise on there.
So if you want clarification from yesterday to what you have done now, the panel is seated there and you have the discussions. So can we have the panel and the discussions interacting? Right, do you have any questions? Any point that you want clarified? Anything disturbing? Like maybe I might want to say, yes, in our region, we are discovering oil. Insurance companies are excited, but I haven't seen anything. So where do we stand in this?
I think we discussed this at lunchtime today, that one of the challenges for East Africa at the moment is that the low oil price is going to put a dent for the time being in new activity taking place. Is that better? The current low oil price is going to have an impact in East Africa, where there isn't much existing infrastructure at the moment. So any new project will be a big project with billions of dollars invested, and the oil companies will probably sit on their hands at the moment. The large oil companies will continue to sit on their hands. They'll leave the oil and the gas in the ground because they know it's still there, and they'll wait for the prices to recover. And in the meantime, they will concentrate on developing smaller fields in parts of the world that are more developed, where they can have ties to existing infrastructures, ties to existing pipelines. Because if you start development in an area where there's very little existing infrastructure, the first ones in, you've got to put all the pipelines in, you've got to have the onshore gathering stations and facilities in place. So it's a huge, huge investment. And so I think that will slow the development up at the moment. One of the reasons that we're here is that we see this as an opportunity to build relationships with people now for when the market does turn, and the oil and gas market will turn and the insurance market will turn.
So that's still the doom for the East African industry.
What type of
We just say there's still a lot of capacity in.
unless you start singing.
Yeah. Does that spell doom for the East African market? Because, like Jeff was saying, there's more capacity in Russia, the Iranians are coming in, the US is doing a lot more. So, we don't see a point where the prices will start going up.
I think it might be an element of glue.
Too much food in Russia.
I think gloom is the right word. There'll be an element of gloom because nothing will happen in the short term. But the important thing for East Africa is those reserves are still there. You've still got the oil, you've still got the gas. Worldwide population is increasing. There is always a need for natural resources. So at some point it will become viable.
The coverage and the exclusions. Construction and operation means that...
Use the microphone.
Construction and transfer to operations, that means the completion of drilling and begin the production of crude oil. My question is, the policy, one policy for the construction and operation, or construction policy and operation policy? Two policies.
Not all separate policies.
Yes. Is it possible to one policy?
It is possible, but more commonly, construction, because of its long-term nature, because of the requirement to ensure not just the principal, but so many different contractors and subcontractors, offshore construction is of a specialist nature and therefore has its own tailor-made policy.
I mean, you may recall that when we did a lot of the Petrogar insurances and Jinpok as well in Sudan, we actually had a section on that policy where we did construction. But that was with a market, Sheikh and the other Sudanese markets understood what we were doing. And we basically were doing those constructions on effectively a block basis, which means that it was a capital expenditure. There was an ECV, estimated contract value for the project, but then what we got from the assured was, over say a 3-year period of the construction, we got a capital expenditure amount associated with each one of the years. And what was good about that was that there was a beginning and a middle. There was an agreement with all parties, all the underwriters agreed to write it for that 12-month period. And they would be reviewed at the same time that the operational aspect of policy was renewed. So it is possible, but it really only works when you have a market that are comfortable with it and that have been with you for a long, long time. So there are situations where you can do it, but Rob's right. The common way is to have them separate. But you can get around it if you've got the relationships with the market and understanding of the market, and crucially, the understanding of the client.
The compromise is they have common insurance.
Yeah, I mean, the commonality there was that there's common insurers that were writing both the operational and the construction, and you don't always get that. So you can get it happening, but it's the only way it works. You have to have the market writing it across the board.
Thanks for the presentation of the trends. but if you can throw some word on the global oil politics.
What's right?
The global oil politics.
Global oil politics. Oh. Would I be here if
I mean, that was my opinion about, it's really a fight between OPEC and really tight oil. And it's it's basically the US with the shale, Canada as well with the shale, Australia with the coal bed methane. You've got the enhanced oil recovery stuff coming into play, where there's big inroads on that technology-wise across the board. Those three are the main ones. And I mean, I really don't know. I mean, from reading the literature, I mean, it seems pretty clear that the Saudis and the Kuwaitis are not going to turn around and reduce their production. So I don't really see how it's going to end. I mean, what a lot of the people in the States are doing in North Dakota. I mean, North Dakota it has the highest production of oil outside of Texas in the USA. I mean, how can you believe that? I mean, if you told me that 4 years ago, I would have thought you were nuts. But they are. I mean, that's just how much they've going forward. And what they're doing in a lot of that in North Dakota especially, is they're actually, because they're taking advantage of the cheap drilling rates that are applicable now. So they're doing a lot of drilling, but they're just not doing the producing. They're just shutting in the wells and they're waiting. So, but there's still this glut that's out there. So I don't know how to answer your question. Maybe one of the other guys on the panel knows that, but I really don't. And if I didn't know the answer to that, I'd go to a casino pretty soon.
You come in the middle. Thank you. Yeah, right? Here? Okay.
Rami Hassan?
Well done.
Abdal Unaim Abbas Rahman. Duncan Kamal. Robert Langat. Robert. Joshua Wanzia.
Thank you.
Justice Sun. Okay. Justice.
Thank you.
Veterans Mwang. Taufik.
Thank you.
We'll send you the copies on salt.
John Kigozi.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can I get away with one photo?
Stella Corina.
Thank you.
Sanjay Suchak.
Sanjay's not here today.
Congratulations. Edward Ngama.
Thank you.
Well done. Congratulations.
Nila Ongera. Atif Aisa.
They are going to stand up. Congratulations.
Odete Nyirasoni. Jojo Butu, you ready? Charles Mwai. Jojo Butu. Charles Mwai. Francis Kamau.
Thank you.
Martin Moya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
You can have one after. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody didn't get a certificate? And you are here. So everybody got their certificate. Thank you very much.